So this session will be about market, more precisely on market sizing. Uh, Two sentences about myself. My name is Madhukar. I am partner at India Quotient, largely focus on consumer internet businesses. And in that specifically, I love social media and content, those kind of businesses. So I will not waste a lot of time and just get started with the session on market. Uh, it would be great. The first half of the session, I will basically tell you about the general lingo, jargons, etc., which are used and how people look at markets. Towards the second half, I will expect that you guys should participate with your thoughts as we try to size a couple of markets as depending on what we have learned theoretically. So I'll share my screen and then we can take some of the concepts. Everyone can see?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
sorry, Madhukar, can you just put it in full screen mode?
Yeah.
Great.
So, this is a very well-known thing that venture capital business is largely about identifying and understanding markets, right? So, if you see the a picture of jargons related to venture capital, you will see that the market is right in the center and is depicted in the biggest font, largely to reflect that the importance of market is not lost on anyone, whether it's a founder, whether it's a investor, or 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 even if you talk about employees, etc. So everyone is looking at the market, and the most exciting, the most largest market generally gets the best investors interested, the best founders interested, as well as the quality of talent which you can attract to a good market is also very easy, and the quality is very high. So I'll start with a quote from Mark Anderson, and here it says, and so you start to wonder what correlates the most to success: team, product, or market. And one more bluntly, what causes success? Uh, and for those of us who are students of startup failure, what's most dangerous? A bad team, a weak product, or a poor market? This is a very famous blog of Mark Anderson. You guys should go and read it. These two lines I have picked from there. And he goes on to say that market is the most important aspect which largely decides the failure or success of the enterprise. He says, he goes on to say that in a good market, a bad team with a bad product also wins. But if the market is not good, however good the product is or however good the team is, generally they don't end up into outcomes which are which are meaningful for venture capital business model. So with this, so with the question comes is, why is this market sizing very important? As I said, VC model is a home run model. So in the last two sessions, Ritesh and Priyank told you that how difficult it is to do a 3x, 4x fund. And generally, most of that 3x or 4x of the fund also has to largely come from one or two companies. So therefore, you have to basically choose those markets where you are playing, which are very large market, and if you win, you really win big. So getting a product market fit or getting a success in a small market is okay, and you do make money. Founders also make money. Sometimes VC also make money, but they are not really. They don't move the needle much for the venture businesses as such. Now there are two kinds of mistakes which happen generally in market sizing. The first is that everyone is in a very happy mode. So the definitions are very broad. The founders optimism is very high, and the investors are also saying, oh, very large market. so everything looks very hunky dory, and the market sizing is largely being done on broad parameters. And the result is that after 2 or 3 years, you realize that okay, the market was not that big as it seemed, right? And then you realize that the kind of investment or the kind of enthusiasm which was there in the first couple of years has now suddenly made the business unviable, because it has raised so much money because the market expectation was very high, and therefore the result is not going to be as per the expectations. On the other hand, the 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 conventional thinking, the herd mentality, absence of incumbents, generally also leads to people missing out on very large markets, right? So Zoom we are all seeing, and we are all seeing that I don't think anybody was able to predict or would have been able to say that Zoom will reach to 300 million daily active users in 2020, right? And in 2010 or 11, when they started this company, uh, everyone asked that what's so different, what is different between Zoom and Skype and Cisco and so many other companies. But sometimes you are not able to pick on the new markets, the change in the business, in the behavior of the customer, sometimes extraordinary event happening like COVID, or in India, which happened 3 years back, which was demonetization. These kind of things are also sometimes very critical while sizing the markets. So they then yeah.
Madhukar, can you give an example of a company in India where all the investors overestimated the market size?
Yeah. So give you example. In fact, we also to an extent overestimated the market size. I think if you look at the affiliate market, right, when internet started in India, internet investing or venture capital internet business started booming around 2012, 13, 14, when the Flipkart started growing, Myntra was also growing, and so many other e-commerce companies were also growing. Everyone thought that building an affiliate business, which will basically supply users to some of these large marketplaces, will result into great outcomes, right? And I think every fund in the country had one or two companies invested in that space, right? We haven't seen anything meaningful come out of that, right? So I think that was a very clear market which had a very false sense of a large market, and nobody made anything out of that.
Okay, Madhukar, understood. Thank you for taking the swipe on me.
No, we were also there, but so were many other people, right? So coming to the types of market, right, there are three kinds of these definitions are, some of them I have taken from other people. Some of these definitions we use internally at India Quotient. So for example, at India Quotient, we look at markets in three different forms. One is an existing market, like a financial service business or a brand business, where the markets are existing and you might have a product which is better, or you have better distribution, better team, and so on and so forth, right? And you are trying to play over there. And then the second form of market is a market which is transforming. So for example, a digital payment, although it's not a new market, but it's a transforming market. So payments for the last 5, 7 years, 8 years, we have been saying that how more and more people are coming, and everyone comes with some unique thing, and more users are now getting used to payments, digital payments. And so digital payment market in India is a transforming market, while a new market is generally difficult to figure out. But some of the examples of new markets is probably the market which was discovered by OK Credit and Khata Book in terms of the users, even with nobody actually going after that market, that small business where they have 3, 4, 5 people running a business. Most of the software was not being made for those people, and those are the new markets where new products, new services get created and generally end up creating a lot of value. So we try to put a product or a service or a company which is looking to raise money in one of these segments, and then try to look at it with the perspective of whether it's a new market, whether it's a transforming market, and whether it's existing market. I will give you the example of a transforming market. So for example, ride hailing or cab business has been a existing business for like maybe 50, 60 odd years, and around 2009, 10, this became a transforming market because there were 2 or 3 technologies which suddenly became mainstream, right? So maps, payments, and smartphones, right? These 3 technologies kind of became mainstream around the same time, and that led to the business model of Uber and so many other companies. So that there the market was existing, so people were going in a car, people were hailing cabs, people were using cars to go from one place to another. But the transformation which happened because of Uber and those three key technologies which became very, very prominent at that point in time, we all saw what happened after that. So there are some key components of the market size, like existing market size based on what kind of product, service you are basically building, and what is the need you are trying to serve. How fast the market is growing. If it is an existing market, then how fast it is growing, and how fast it is looking like to grow for the next so many years, because your company is which you are investing in, that will become exitable in a few years. So you want to invest in a growing market rather than a shrinking market. And what is the scope of expansion of the market due to innovation? So is there any scope of innovation left uh, at a startup level? So for example, if you are getting into a business which is going to do ticketing for airlines, right? Is there anything you can improve drastically because of uh, having a better product, right? And can you expand the market by doing better ticketing? So that you will have to understand, because the number of airlines are same, the number of passengers who are traveling, you are not making much impact over there. You can have a better product in terms of doing the ticketing which is faster, maybe the matchmaking is better, maybe the payment solution is better, but that will not lead to the total number of people flying or total number of planes increasing, and the airlines using more planes to expand the market. And the last thing is how many competitors are there, the market, how much uh, how much monopoly is possible in this market. Are there already existing competition in the market, or are there other competitors who are not yet in the market but they're lurking and they're in adjacent markets? Very recently we have seen what has happened, what will happen to the grocery market, for example. So a lot of investment has happened in grocery market, but now 2 players, Facebook, which is a payments and a social media company, and Reliance Jio is an offline retail company. Both of them are combining, and now they will take on some of the online grocery and e-commerce companies. So these are some of the key components of the market size which you have to keep in mind while you are thinking about the market size. This is a I picked from internet. This is basically a nomenclature of how you size the market. So there's a potential markets opportunity, then total addressable market, and segment addressable market, and eventually what is the expected share of the addressable market which the company which you are evaluating is supposed to or can take in the 6-7 years which you are going to be invested in. And you have to make sure that this expected share of the addressable market is at least $100 million in 6 to 7 years, so that the company has an exitable size of $1 billion, and that is at least the minimum number which most VCs look at because that is the minimum size of the market which will allow you to have a home run in your portfolio. So when you go to the market sizing problem, defining the market, the key parameters of your product is very important. Otherwise, you can go and do a mistake of uh, thinking that the whole world is your market, right? So I was listening to some podcast few weeks or few months back, and somebody was saying that uh, before Amazon came up with Kindle, there were a lot of other people who also wanted to make a product which is, sorry, who also wanted to make a product where people can use read ebooks, which would have a screen and it would have a battery, and the expected market size was that the whole world will use it, right? Now we have seen that in the last 12-15 years there are so many companies, including Kindle and iPad and so many other companies, but the whole world is not reading the books on electronic medium only, right? So you have to basically define your problem. You have to see that how many people are really going to use or are affected by this problem. You have to look at the existing solution for that problem which you are evaluating, and how many people or what is the current market for that solution which is solving that problem as of today. And then the third thing is acuteness of the problem. This was in our retreat this year in February. Mukul Arora of SAF was there, and he was saying that he said that in finding out the size of the market, the acuteness of the problem also plays a very significant role, because if the problem which is getting solved is very acute, then the market size grows very fast, because the pain point, the pain which you are solving is so painful that people don't care, and the behavior of the people changes much faster compared to a problem which you are solving is not really it's not really pain point, but it's more of a luxury kind of a product or convenience product, right? And then you have to look at the scalability and the viability of the product. And then the final thing, which is you at one point of time you have to look at the product, because these are early days. You have to be very specific about the market which you are attacking, but at the same time you also have to have a view that if this specific problem is solved, and if you are able to penetrate this market, how much of this can be broadened, right? So on a broader level, what extra product services you can serve basis this business which you are building, or how you can scale geographically. Is there an advantage which you are creating which is a technological advantage which you can export in other geographies? So you have to think of the problem in the beginning as a very specific problem, but at the same time you also have to see that if this works out, how you can make it as broad as possible and reach a large number of people, or a large addressable market. I think in this aspect, I'll give the example of Facebook. Facebook started with a thought of making people meet inside universities, US universities. And once they were able to do that, they realized that they could export the same product with modifications, of course, to the whole world, right? And you see how big Facebook has become. So you have to have some idea of a narrow market, but then gradually how it will broaden, that also you have to factor in the very beginning itself. So broadly, there are two methods which are used for market sizing. One is top down and second is bottoms up. So in the top down method, you start with some market research data on an adjacent similar market or a existing product which is serving the same market, and then you make assumptions according to your product or service, and you keep cutting down that market or adding the market depending on what you're doing, and then you reach to a certain market size which is applicable or which is serviceable or expected market for you. on the bottoms up sizing method, you actually go more fundamentally. So what you do is you typically try to create a archetype or a persona of your consumer or your user. If you are B2C company, then a user, or if you're B2B company, then you find out that what kind of company is going to be your customer. And then from there on, you keep moving up, and you see that you try to create that persona, that this person will live somewhere here, this person will use my product because of this constraint, his paying ability is this, and so many people like this are there in this particular city. Then there are so many cities which are there, which I can address in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, so on and so forth. And then gradually you move to a market size which basically takes you to a calculation, right? Now, both the methods are, there's no problem with either of the methods. The information, the the second method, the bottoms up method, has you have to put a lot of assumption in that. So if your assumptions go wrong, or if you don't have the right information at the bottom, then the chances are that you might miss the market size uh, by some order also. So it becomes tricky. In top down market, you will not get a very accurate sense of the market, but the chances of you going wrong uh, is less, right? So typically it is advisable that both the methods are used. The top to down market assumption or top to down market analysis or market sizing is done more on a broader level, on a thumbs rule basis. But when you go into details, and if you are evaluating a company and you are really uh, drilling down to the details, then you go and do the bottoms up market sizing method. In bottoms up market sizing, generally you mostly rely on primary source of data. So you will have to go and talk to a few customers as you are building the profile of the customers. You will have to speak to the customer. Whatever assumptions you have, you will have to basically cross check your assumptions. You have to be careful that you are not bucketing yourself into a few biased kind of a customer base, and therefore you are building a profile of a customer which is as per your bias, but there are not many of them in the market, right? So they're not representative of the market. So you have to be careful about that. So uh, in in bottoms up method, you will have to do interview, surveys, sampling, all kind of primary methods. In top down method, you will go with more internet market research data. You can go and look at a comparable company which is listed, which will give you annual data of revenues, costs, etc., etc. So you can basically do the do market sizing in both these two methods. uh, I think the theory part of this session is, I have this much to present. If if you have any ideas on this, or if you want me to go into a detail in any of these things, happy to. So I'll open for questions for 5-7 minutes. After that, we basically go and look at some of the cases.
Madhukar,
Yeah.
I have a question. So a lot of investors, particularly Western investors, they say that you should invest in things that you will use yourself, right? And they advise the same to founders also, that founders should build things that they need themselves, right? But this hasn't worked in India, or has it?
So, Anand, I think the investors who say this in US, they are largely so venture capital in US is largely software investment, right? So B2C has been largely in the last 10-12 years more venture capital investment has happened in B2C. Otherwise, venture capital has been largely representative of software investments in US, right? So I think the US investors, uh, the US, I would say the very famous investors have always said that you should you should be a customer, or you should know the customer, or you should have felt the pain point of that, something like that. That's very much applicable for software companies, right? And if you see uh, in US, most of the large software companies which have been built, they were built by people who were coming out of other large software companies, right? So they were mostly enterprise and SaaS companies. They were aware of the key pain points, and therefore they were the representative uh, customers or buyers of those softwares. But in India, venture capital success largely has till now, in terms of fundraising, also has largely come in B2C. Over here, the mismatch is that the B2C businesses, if you start investing on the premise that what I am using or what I am doing, then typically most of the VCs in the last 20 years in India have been people who have largely studied in US, or have worked in US, or have a largely in metropolitan cities, right? So they are maybe the top 1 or 2% of the population. So what they do with respect to their life, most of those things are not very relevant to a very large section of population, right? And therefore sometimes we miss large markets. You have yourself told two examples. I will basically use those two examples for the benefit of other people in this session. So Redbus is a very good example where Anand's previous fund, Seed Fund, was an investor, and Redbus for the first few years was struggling to raise capital beyond seed fund, because everyone said that, okay,
Till Ritesh came in, we were.
yeah, yeah, because everyone was saying that, okay, bus तो ठीक है, but कौन बस में जाता है, बस में कौन चढ़ता है, right? So, and that is true, right? So most of the people who were getting pissed, I think they had not traveled in a bus for at least 5-10 years from the time they were being pitched, right? So there was they couldn't relate to it. I think similar example you gave of Lenskart also, right? So when Lenskart was raising capital, and so so it's like sometimes the biases are such that you think that it is a very very elite kind of thing. So to complete the Lenskart argument, Anand told me this story in Seed Fund that Lenskart came to pitch, and there were 4 or 5 people in the room, and they decided that the market is small. The reason was that they thought that how do poor people can afford specs, right? So and the 5 people who were in the room, they thought that this is some kind of privilege only for the rich, right? And how can people go and buy 3,000 or 5,000 rupees of glasses, right? And therefore you turn down those kind of investments. So I think our personal biases are sometime stop us from seeing the reality, and the reality is very much there, right? So I think especially in case of Redbus or in Lenskart, if somebody doesn't bring their ego or bias, it is very clear that both these markets were very very large markets. So coming back to the point I was trying to make is that when I started investing around 2008-9, I think the first few people I interacted with, and when we're trying to understand about how to size the markets, and I think the key thing is that you have to basically look at the market in a very optimistic way, at the same time being very very skeptical about it, right? So generally what happens is that either you are optimistic or you are pessimistic, right? In both the cases there is a chance of you making an error, right? So if you are very optimist, then you broaden yourself, and you are basically getting too greedy, and you have too much of faith on something working out in a miraculous way. And if you are very pessimistic, then you are trying to find fault in every argument which the founder is trying to make, or whatever data is being presented to you. So I think in both the cases, either you make the this side error or that side error. So the right approach is that you have to be optimistic, but at the same time you have to be skeptical, thereby asking as many questions as possible and thereby uh, trying to find out the reasons why you are feeling uncomfortable about a particular market. And it is a difficult task to do, especially when you are in a market where uh, the fear of missing out is very high, because most of the stuff which you have been doing for the last few years, everything looks like it's not working. So when somebody comes up with a new plan, and five more people are evaluating that, then sometimes you start either being very optimistic or being very pessimistic about it. So yeah, so Anand, anybody else has a question? Anand had one question. Anybody else has any questions? Then we can move on to the exercise part.
Ritesh Pank, would you like to add something?
Here, I have learned to be a little skeptical uh, market sizes in general, and my own attempts to do market sizes in particular. Uh, I have gotten them wrong more often than right. Uh, so at least I don't believe in uh, my own snake oil in this,
Ritesh,
because
that is true. But I think by and large, our biggest reason for failure is market size, isn't it?
but I don't know what you would call failure, Anand. My personal bigger reasons for failure is underestimating market sizes rather than overestimating them.
Oh, okay.
Uh, so, and not just failure. I can share a few examples.
Sure,
Um,
please do.
so I had invested in Taxi for Sure, and at that point, when we made the investment, I did a classic market sizing exercise. आज इतनी taxis हैं, 5 साल में इतनी taxis हो जाएंगी, उसको इतना % online चली जाएगी. Today there are more taxis on Ola alone than I had projected for the entire industry, not for the tech based apps industry, but the entire taxi population in India at that point. So this is an example of, Madhukar, what you were calling transformative markets or market transformation, that because of an innovation, the size of the market increases beyond what you had imagined. Now, I think I got it spectacularly wrong. Just and because of which we also under invested in this space, because the potential exit size was going to be limited. We put in small amounts of money, and I do think that ended up costing us in the long run, because our company was less capitalized than the competition, where they obviously had a higher estimate of market size. So while that was not the only reason, but I do think that my own underestimate of market size actually cost us a huge opportunity cost. We made quite a bit of money on that investment, but still could have made a lot more. And at least I got it wrong by one order of magnitude, if not two, the market size for shared taxis in India. So one challenge that I have is this transformation of markets. How do you estimate market size? The other challenge I've had is estimating what percentage of the market can go online or be technology enabled. So in that chart that you shared, Madhukar, which was a series of concentric circles,
Yeah.
Even if you get the top circle right or the second circle right, the third circle, which is how much of that market is addressable or targetable or whatever you call it. And I'll give another example of where I have failed at that. In around 2013 or so, or maybe, 2013, I looked very closely at Book My Show and, evaluated them in a fair amount of detail. One of the reasons I declined in the end was because I estimated maybe, I think, some 10-12% of the market to go online. and that was coming out to be a very small number. That because the market for cinemas is not growing that much. Uh, the market for cinemas was relatively fixed or growing at whatever 10-15% a year. And at a 10% number or a 12% number, I don't remember my assumption, maybe 10, 12, 15, whatever that number was, it was still coming to be a very small addressable market. And obviously, so we declined Book My Show for that reason, or in fact, we didn't decline. We gave a lower valuation than what we would have given if we had estimated the market size to be larger. And obviously, that was a mistake. And the reason it turned out to be a mistake was not because the number of cinemas or the ended up being more than what we had imagined. I personally fail to appreciate the fact that there is a tipping point effect in these industries, that there is almost never a steady state of 10-12% penetration. Either it's a 2-3% penetration or it's a 30-40% penetration in a short while. And that is indeed what has happened with Book My Show. They went very quickly from a 7-8% penetration to a 30-40% penetration in the space of a couple of years. And getting that right is very, very hard. So I am broadly a little skeptical of this exercise. And now what I try to do, not to say that I don't estimate the size of a market at all, I do. But I try not to get too granular about it. And I try to estimate the size of a pain point as opposed to the size of a market. So if I were to do the exercise for taxis again, I would triangulate two things. I would not do it the way I did the first time, by looking at the number of taxis and the productivity of those taxis, and it increases by X and so on. I would look at the number of people in the country who need a commute solution, and the number of people in the country who can afford a commute solution at the price points that, let's say, shared taxis offer. So the point being, rather than, and this is completely personal to me, mostly because of the misjudgments I have made in the past, that I now look at market at the size of a pain point as opposed to the size of a solution. Because it is impossible for me to predict how many people actually will use a solution, whereas it is a little more possible for me to predict how many people actually need some kind of a solution, if not this exact solution. So sorry, I don't know if I'm making sense, but I do this in a much less precise manner now than I used to.
Ritesh, this is right, because this is the most complex thing for us to do, and this is an art. It's not a science, and we cannot. I mean, particularly if we like the founder, we cannot have very strong views about the market, right? Sometimes if we like the founder, we probably have to give some credibility to the founder also, and maybe other investors, because of course you can always go wrong, but transformations do happen, right? The reverse also happens. When one of the first online delivery food companies called Rocket Sandwiches, it was called Rocket Sandwiches, and we thought that people will do home delivery of sandwiches. The company did fabulously well. Like the metrics were fabulous, retention, repeat, everything. We were the first company to start ordering on WhatsApp in those days. But the problem was that we thought people will order sandwich for lunch or dinner. But the problem was that for most people, sandwich was always a snack, for normal people. Unless you traveled to America or anywhere, somewhere like that, maybe London, you would think of sandwich as a snack only. So people would order a sandwich in the evening rather than in lunch. And the sandwich also was designed to be more like a sophisticated sandwich. It did very well, but the market was not very large. And when we shut down, people actually complained. What happened? Your sandwich was very good, right? So because for us, it was like a very obvious thing. It's a great product, great team, everything. But then the actual market was not. I mean, like what we thought. Probably, we like the sandwich. Maybe people like us like the sandwich, everybody I would meet would love the sandwich. But then, my universe is what my universe is, right? I mean, it's not like a normal person on the street who has 50 rupees budget for lunch. He cannot eat a sandwich. So you can go wrong on the other side also, where you go wrong. I mean, so however, in a similar situation, like fresh menu, for example, was premium food. They eventually expanded their menu beyond the premium food and catered to other segments. Very difficult there as well.
So
A
Ritesh,
lot of
if I look at this startup investing problem, right, of the product, team, and the market, right? These are three things on which you invest, right? And being an early stage investor, right, the call on product is not really the right call because it changes, right? So especially if you are investing in the first 6-8 months, the product is in a very the product is basically a representation or a reflection of the team, right? So the team's capability. So what I have learned, what my experience has been the last 10 years is that being absolutely right on people, right? So to develop a gut on people vis-a-vis markets, right? Markets are still scientific, right? So you might still go wrong by in a few cases, and you will still have some metrics to at least avoid the big judgments, big error judgments, right? If you can easily, at least the corner cases you are able to cut out, right? Maybe the new market corner case you are not able to cut out if you are very biased, but most of the other stuff you are able to cut out. In people, it is even more difficult. I find it in people, it is people being able to take a call on people very early. uh, that basically makes me more uncomfortable, and it looks more unscientific to me. So developing a gut in terms of taking a faith on people is slightly more
the point there is that in a transformational market, uh, you will never know what the eventual market size is, right? So in those cases,
directionally you will know, Anand. So
maybe you might, if you reject the market for being too small, you might err on the wrong side. That's the point.
no, so what I'm saying is that directionally you will have some. If you're looking closely, directionally you will have an idea. I am 100% there with Ritesh that for somebody to predict in 2010-11 that the taxi market will be so large, that would have been a problematic area. I mean, it's very difficult to predict. But if somebody was looking at the changes which were happening in technology with respect to mapping, with respect to smartphone, and with respect to payments, right? All these three things, it was looking like that something is happening, right? It was not very clear that what will be the right business model, or whether it will be that big. But वो थोड़ा सा मतलब वहां पे hint मिल रहा था.
Okay. Priyank?
Hey guys, yes.
Sorry, I do have another point to make. I'm certainly not advocating that we should not try to assess the size of an opportunity at all. In fact, I think it is important to assess it. I don't think it is important to precisely predict it.
Yeah.
But the nuance that I'm talking about is, rather than assess the market size for a product, I would assess the market size for that need, which is different from the product. I'll give you an example. Many of us declined Flipkart both in seed and Series A rounds. Flipkart was not and Priyank is here. I don't think, Priyank, you were there at Accel at the time, but Flipkart was a very well discovered deal. So there was no, I would say, proprietary access at that time that Accel had to the deal. Most VCs who were active, I'm sure Anand, I'm sure Seed Fund had looked at Flipkart.
I personally.
Yeah, I have also personally passed. And then the second time for Seed, Seed I had personally passed Series A along with another colleague I had passed. And everyone had passed Flipkart. And I think people passed for three different reasons. Um, I thought that there was a category of VCs who passed because they said the market size for books in India was very small. I think that was a really, really short-term view. But that was, I would say, category one of VCs. There was a second category of VCs who felt the market size for e-commerce itself in India will remain very small. And the third category of VCs that passed, I thought did, in my mind, a better analysis, even though they passed. They said that this is a massive opportunity, but it will take a huge amount of money to address this opportunity. So, and we don't have that kind of money to support. I have seen both number one and number two arguments, which, if we were to take this kind of lens, if we were to assess the market for books in India, even today we'll come to the same conclusion that that it is too small a market and we should not fund this company, which is what I would suggest. Sorry, once. Which is what I think might have also happened with the sandwich company. The second VCs at least assessed that the scope was bigger than books, but still could not imagine how many people would actually need or want e-commerce. If you had told me in 2009 that there would be 100 million e-commerce users in India 10 years from now, I would have laughed. So certainly, I'm not saying that that I knew.
I think that your reasons are right. I think for me, it was the fact that it was only in books. And I thought that it will take a lot to go from books and beyond. So let me evaluate only for the books game. I was already involved in fashion in this company called Inkfruit. So I was very bullish on e-commerce, but I felt that books is a small category, and how can you go from books to everything else, right? So that's like not possible. That's just a big talk, and that was the reason. I mean, of course, what we have seen, one thing is that if there is a pivot, a well-backed company will always pivot, right? I mean, that is the story to learn in India. The pivots are very easy, and you can't discount pivots. So same reason.
I will go even further, Anand. I will actually not even call it a pivot. I would say that this is actually the way many startup companies grow.
Yeah.
That they first dominate a niche, and then they expand out of that niche.
True.
And of course, I mean, if I had that foresight, I would be sitting on a, I don't know, Priyank, what was it, 1000x exit for the seed money?
Oh, absolutely.
But that's not the point. The point is that it is in 2008, when Flipkart got its first seed round, it was very hard to predict what is the size of the e-commerce opportunity in India. But if we could get a directional sense that it will be large versus it will be small, I do agree with you, Madhukar, that getting that sense is important. Where I'm disagreeing a little bit maybe, or disagreeing with the methodology, is that I would much rather assess how many people can afford e-commerce type deliveries and how many people would have internet access to be able to access those deliveries, as opposed to do some kind of a precise extrapolation of what, this is the books market. This is what I did wrong in which was the company in taxis, that this is the books market today, this will be the books market tomorrow, so much percentage will be online, so this gives the 100 million or not. That I have found I have gone wrong more often than not. So these days I try not to do that analysis, but rather do
Ritesh,
that more top down rather than bottoms up.
Ritesh, if I chime in, I have a very similar view and guys, all the partners are discussing among themselves, but essentially what you can understand is the market sizing is a very debatable topic, and there's a huge degree of inaccuracy in any market size which you estimate. So there are a couple of thumb rules which kind of developed over a period of time, right? So when we look at, at least when I look at investments, when I joined, there will be rule of thumbs like let it be $1 billion market online, which is growing, or $500 million market online. What I realized is since the uncertainty is so high and the inaccuracy of estimating is so high, there should be no question of market size. So you should be looking at $5 to $10 billion markets when you're picking up to do investments, right? And that just takes care of, if you're arguing between a $5 billion and $10 billion market, and you're investing in a company in that market, then that is a huge market. Does not matter whether but I mean it matters if you are debating between a $500 million and $1 billion market. I think then the success of the company becomes much smaller. With respect to, like, for example, if you look at D2C brands today, each brand by itself may be targeting a smaller market in India, or for example, the Flipkart book use case example. I think what I started to realize is when you invest in such kind of small markets, initially you have to look at a team and see its capability to become a platform. Whether the company can actually become a huge and large platform to do a lot of, either launch multiple brands, launch multiple SKUs, just so that they expand into they land into multiple other markets and expand over there, right? So that's the second. The third one, I think, is we don't talk about, I think when we are talking about markets, I think the term market is very misunderstood. What we are really talking about is trends. So we know that a company takes 10 years to get to some scale, and then after that, it's not that after 10 years you just exit and then you're done, right? The company has to survive after that. So we are looking at least I look at multi-decadal trends which can exist. Some of them are obvious, some of them are non-obvious. Especially in transformative markets, very difficult to understand those. For example, I've been looking at space tech in India for a long time now. It's hard to estimate what will happen, how will happen. So you just have to spend a lot of time to understand each of those. And in some places we have been right. So like B2B marketplaces, we realized huge spends. We saw transformation happening, and we said, what if? And that what if went right in some of our companies, right? So I think those are the top three things when I at least do a market sizing. Don't go too much by it, the market size. But if you're going by the market size, just have no questions asked on how big the market is going to be. The moment you start debating into $500 million hai ki billion hai, you're already lost the battle. Then whatever market size, and you estimate, and this is the Book My Show example, for example, right? Whatever, or Flipkart example, whatever initial use case you're sizing the market for, if you can judge that the company can expand out much bigger, then you have taken care of that. So that's a capability judge. Then finally, I think the big one is what market do you want to play in as an investor, right? So there are, for example, I always try to play in new markets, and you will see all the outsized returns which happen in majority of VC industry come from new markets, with like having contrarian bets. When you do the bet at that point of time, it thinks it's a stupid or it's a very weird bet. Why is that person taking that bet? Like look at Airbnb, look at Uber, look at things which just you can't imagine, right? And you have to be open for it. Those are the best markets to play in, but obviously to play in, you have to be those are extremely hard markets to find out and dig. So that's, and the easier the market somebody size, the easier somebody else, other investors also jump into that market and invest. It's best when you are taking a tricky market, or identifying markets ahead of other people. I think that's a success story for a VC.
Yeah, Priyank, I have one question, right? So we generally see this discussion of new markets, right? So I also like to brag that I also want to invest in new markets, right? But when these new markets where people invest, right, and when it plays out, there has to be a thesis behind it, right? Otherwise, it's punting, right? So new market. Would it be fair to say that the first guy or the first 5 guys who put money in Uber, I know that they were not able to think that this will be $100 billion company, but were they not able to see that this was going to be at least a $5 billion company? Not even that?
I think that's a tough one, Madhukar, and I think it depends on how each of the funds also forces you to think about the market size, right? So there are cases where at least I have been unable to understand the size of the market completely, and we have not invested because we said the market size might be small. So again, that's the inaccuracy part, right? And other funds have invested, and the company has become very large, and while staying in that particular market. I think those are the things of that is the judgment which is required. Now, the guys who initially invested in Uber, for example, right? So there are two types of investing. One, you could take a market view, or in B2C, you could also take a metric view and say how fast is the company growing and how quickly the company is getting adopted by the customer. If the company is going very quickly and getting adopted by the customer, then it goes back to what Mukul Arora was saying, right? There's a pain point and the market will just expand. People will just get to know very quickly and everybody will start using it very fast. I think those are the proof points in the cases where you are unable to understand the market very well yourself, right? So that's why you see those two types of investing. One is where the market is very you can articulate and understand very well, or where the metrics are just showing that the company is growing extremely fast. And in both cases, you might end up hitting a wall anyways, right? So that is the game, right? Early stage. But those are the two I would look at.
Yeah, momentum. What you're saying is momentum, right?
Yeah.
Like how we discussed, right? I mean, about trends as to why is Zoomcar doing well, right? I mean, whatever demand, it's counterintuitive. Most Indians would not like a self-driver because the prices are similar, whether you take a car with a driver or a car without driver in Zoomcar. But then the thing is that people don't have their own houses. They are staying 6 people in an apartment in Bangalore, and for getting some personal time or going out with their girlfriend, boyfriend, they will want to rent a car, right? And that's a trend which is increasing. So I think what Prank is saying is that there are serious momentum because of either technology changes or cultural changes, or for example that the phenomenon of a single child, for example, that's increasing significantly, or people not staying with their parents, or maids becoming expensive. These are decadal trends, and these trends will change the behavior significantly away from what it was in the past. Maybe sometimes it will be similar to Western countries, sometimes it will not be similar to Western countries, sometimes it will be similar to China, maybe sometimes just unique. But these changes are very important to sort of keep the company growing for the next few decades, and that's the only way we can make money anyways, right? The market has to continue to expand for a sizable amount of time.
Yeah, and that is like a thought exercise, right? That's like a mental exercise. What are the trends? I think a lot of times I've seen analysts look at the current number today and just get stuck at कि यार अभी इतना ही है spent. I don't think it'll become big, and that's when you miss if you don't identify the trends very quickly.
Yeah, good, very good point. Probably the most critical point. Madhukar, should we do your exercise?
Yeah, Mohit, somebody has raised his hand.
Hey, hi Madhukar, Shubhro here. I raised my hand at a question.
Yeah.
So the question also draws on one of the previous session. So the question is that when you look at the circles that you have sort of made, and like the last circle, the fourth circle, when you have come to the actual market that can be addressed, how do you think about certain markets in a country like India, which are basically the market even in a long term will never, like whoever the player is will never become profitable. In the sense, certain key factors like your GDP or how people are clustered, or how people of a certain income are clustered, are not going to change. So something like e-commerce or something like e-commerce logistics, let's say in particular, is never going to get profitable, or will take a long time to get profitable. And given that now there is a focus on profitability, how do you think about it? As long as the entrepreneur can sort of sell the story till a Series D, Series E, and I can get my exit, it's fine? Or is it like in perpetuity, someday this actually has to become profitable, and like the model should be made that way, or practically someday this has to be? Because a lot of companies even now, like a Flipkart, the seed guys would have made a lot of money, but the company is still unprofitable. So if they fail to raise, let's say, those 20 stages of investments, I mean, the idea itself is fairly impractical given the logistics cost. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So first of all, there is no excuse, and selling uh, dollar at 90 cents will have an infinite market, right? So no one can argue that. But having said that, I think it is slightly unfair to say that e-commerce or e-commerce logistics will never make money in India, right? I think if you look at the ecosystem which we have, and the per capita income of India, which is currently there, and 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 where it will eventually be, because it is cyclic, and almost all countries, when they get into developing mode, they eventually, after 20, 10, 15, 20, depending on a different time period, they do come out as developed countries. And we have seen that happening in Southeast Asia. We have seen that happening in China, right? And I don't think that it will not happen in India. It's a question of time when it will happen, whether it will happen in the next 5 years or it will happen in the next 10 years. Now, having said that, different investors have different kind of appetite. So somebody who is literally pouring in billions of dollars in the Indian market, he is not really looking at a individual company level performance. They are looking more on a country level performance. So they are relatively well diversified in the country. And uh, and if you go and look at the portfolio allocations of some of those larger investors, you will see that they are putting a very small amount of money, which eventually goes into companies like Flipkart and other loss-making companies. A lot of money also goes in infrastructure, uh, power, and so on, other sectors where they do make money. And this e-commerce money is largely to capture the upside which the economy generates once it moves from a developing to a developed kind of situation. So it is unfair to say that India will never have a profitable e-commerce company, or a profitable social media company, or a profitable. I'm not saying that the ones which are there, they will become profitable or they will not become profitable, but I don't think there is any problem in the business as such, because these very same businesses are profitable in other geographies. They will become profitable at one point in time.
Okay, my question was actually, let's say, I mean, assuming, let's say, talking about a company like WeWork, right? Where now everyone is saying there's no fundamentals, and this model has existed since ever and this doesn't work. But a SoftBank, let's say, gave an exit to more or less all of the early stage investors. So let's say if and maybe SoftBank will not repeat that thing again and again and again. So let's say if you were an early stage investor in a company like a WeWork, would you, like, tomorrow if you invest in a company like WeWork, would you think, okay, a SoftBank or a very large investor is not going to do this again, like this kind of a, backing a company which they also understand? I mean, it's a difficult story to sell on their part also.
So these are bad behaviors, right? So bad behavior will definitely lead to more people expecting that bad behavior, right? But eventually these things do get corrected, right? So now some people would have made money in the SoftBank WeWork thing, which SoftBank bought some equity 3 years back, 2 years back. But there were a lot of people who were expecting that SoftBank will buy again, but they are not buying, right? So they are getting hurt. So these are speculative. These are not very certain markets. So sometimes.
So, bro, you can't invest in a company just hoping that somebody may
you can't
beat the error. Right? It doesn't work that way.
You can't. Having said that, Anand, the reality is that it does infect, right? And it does create the bad behavior. So a SoftBank giving exit to a company, even when the company is not stabilized itself, the other company where SoftBank invests, other investors are also expecting of exiting, right? So
they are expecting, but then that's not a thesis going in, right?
Yeah. Thesis will never be that.
It can't be, right? I mean, this
guys, I think
cannot take over the need for a large market and need for strong trends.
Yeah,
replace that. No, the expectation of bad behavior.
I think these are all things which are led by whenever there is a lot of capital available in the markets. And you need to understand, when investors invest in a company right in the beginning, there is a logical reason, and the business use case must have been good. And as the company continues to get success and raises more and more capital, it's not that day zero, the founder had decided this is what I'm going to do forever and I'll run my entire business on negative contribution margin and all of that. Right? It is a matter of when somebody comes in and starts giving, a new investor comes in, and how that investor influences the strategy of the company, what decides what the company will do in the future, right? So and we as investors always face this, right? So now at the time of COVID, for example, should I grow, should I not grow? If I don't grow, then I will not be able to raise capital. If I grow, then my money will go out, burn, right? So, and now this is a tricky situation to be in. What do you advise your companies to be? And then there'll be companies who have a lot more capital and say, let me go aggressive and I'll eat out my entire competition. So we are in a game theory situation. So in hindsight, you could say whatever happened in some of these high-bond companies was not right. But at that point of time, the local optimization, the local decision which was made under certain assumptions. Just like any investment which is made under certain assumptions. And if those assumptions don't work out, then you fail. And if those assumptions, and if you are making those assumptions at a very large scale, when the company reach a very large scale, then your fall will be also very spectacular. So I would not read too much into this. This is more a decisioning or a question which you are asking, Shubham.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's see some of the things which you see for market sizing. So so if you want to do a market sizing of online grocery, and if you're doing a top-down approach, so what you will do is you will go and try to find out what is the total grocery market, existing market, which is online, offline, all combined. You'll try to look at the growth rate of the market, how fast the market is growing, or it is shrinking, or what is happening over there. And then you will look at the target customer and start canceling. You will cancel unserviceable customers due to various constraints. For example, you don't have logistics in tier 3, tier 4, or people don't have the paying capability, or people don't have internet penetration is only at 30%, and so on and so forth. You will cut down the market, keep cutting it down, and then eventually you will come down to a market, and then you will say that what is the realistic market share a company which I am evaluating will be able to take from this market, and based on these assumptions, you will reach to a market sizing for the online grocery. This method is a top-down method. This doesn't include you trying to predict it on a very precise manner. You're not looking at you're not trying to build a persona of a customer. You're not doing any primary data collection. So this method will give you a kind of a broad based understanding of how big this market is, and you can do this fairly quickly if you have some amount of research on internet. The same market, when you go and try to do market sizing which is bottoms up, then you will go and try to find out how many total households are there, what is the e-commerce penetration, what is the percentage of urban household, percentage of interest. You'll find out how many people are having a salary above a certain level, what is the frequency of the purchase online, what is the ticket size of the purchase, and based on these assumptions, you basically will go and determine the market size, which will come from building a persona of a customer, or a user for yourself. So basically, the first method is largely a secondary research method, which is based on extrapolation of existing information which is there. And in bottoms up, you will have to do some amount of primary research, and then you will have to use some secondary research, and combine both of that. You will basically try to determine the market size. getting a very in the if you are evaluating company at the early stage, doing the bottoms up market sizing for the limited markets where the company is operational will give you a fair idea of how big the market is, because then you can simply multiply, treat it as a unit and then multiply it into as many units which you believe they are you will be servicing in the next 5 to 7 years, which you want to invest in.
Madhukar, can we see the solution or any?
No, there is no solution.
No, can we see what people have done?
Yeah, I can show. Wait.
It'll be good if we see some examples of what other analysts have done.
Yeah, I'll show. So I don't know किसने किया है, मगर so this is top down grocery का. एक minute.
Okay. And has anybody done analysis of trends as to which way the market is growing?
Which way the
market? What are the underlying trends which will make the market very big? Has anybody done that?
In grocery?
Yeah, in grocery.
No, trend.
Okay.
Share हुआ screen? Can you guys see?
Yeah, we can see.
Some of the things which we see, I think the most of the company valuation, most of the rejections which happen of companies generally comes with the market size excuse only, right? So to be able to explain about the market is increasingly becoming a very key factor of entrepreneur quality in today's time.
Madhukar, so in these sheets we are not looking for an exact answer anyways, right?
No, exact answer किसको पता ही नहीं किसको exact.
Broad size only, right? That's what we're looking for. So yeah, I think it is useful to try to predict the market 5 years from now also, or maybe 10 years from now.
Yeah, market trends. Yeah.
I mean, in general, where is the wind blowing? Right? Okay.
Any questions? I think Anand, we should talk about one more case study, right? I think that will be helpful. If you can, I can also talk about it. Probably you should talk about it. That when we invested in the company which was trying to do sell content offline in a store model, right? A growing market vis-a-vis a shrinking market example.
Yeah.
I think
it's a good example.
So
we invested in this company which was selling movies and music on a memory card, or transferring the music and movies to your smartphone. So you go to a kiosk. The kiosk is in a mall or a supermarket. You go to a kiosk and give the phone for 5 minutes or a few minutes, and the company will transfer some movie, some music, whatever as per your choice, for a price to your phone, right? Now, it's a large market. Of course, in those days, internet was very expensive in India. It was very slow, and particularly HD movies and HD music was very difficult to find or download. So there was a market there, but there was also a sizable parallel piracy market of SIM cards, memory cards loaded with these things circulating. But then if you forecasted technology, it was a completely wrong move. So this was the time in 2012-13 when a lot of people assumed that Indian bandwidth will never go very high. Even if it goes high, people will not be able to afford it because a 5 GB plan in US in those days was like $100 a month. So people thought that Indians can't afford anyways. So the bandwidth will always remain very poor. And our assumption was that the cost of bandwidth will be much higher rather than what we are paying. So people can't afford. People will, even if there is bandwidth available in India, speeds are better. Even then, they will download HD movies offline only. Now that is something that you are basically taking a completely negative view of the future, and you undermine all sorts of technology advances, etc. Right? We all learned our lesson. I think after the Reliance Jio and the fact that everybody today can afford a high quality smartphone. So since then, I think after that debacle, we have completely stopped taking all sorts of anti-technology bets, right? Like you can't bet against trend technology. The fact that the whole world is trying to address India as a market and costs will have to come down. You are better off by doing a positive view of technology and the future rather than negative view of the future, right? So the same thing, like India will never become profitable. India will never buy online. Those kind of views are very easy. You are always going to be wrong if you say never, never, never. Or particularly if it involves technology. That's the lesson we learned.
The interesting thing was that is detailing a little bit the cohort numbers which most of us and including me we like to look at and basically pat our back. The cohort numbers were superb, right? So the cohort numbers were superb. I think the takeoff was, the momentum was also there. The takeoff used to happen very fast. So you open a shop or a kiosk in a,
It was also profitable. So
and it was profitable as well.
yeah.
Yeah, but all of that business actually vanished in within a two years period. Our company was small, but there was another company which was called Apps Daily, which was fairly large, right? And it had raised Series C or D, but then within I think 2 or 3 quarters, with the internet becoming fast and cheap, all those businesses just vanished, right? So you also have to keep a eye on the trends of technology and how the transformation is happening, right? So if you are not careful, then you might end up investing in a business which is sizable at the point of time when you're investing, but very soon it will just vanish away.
Okay, let's go to the online pets. I think we are just 10 minutes left now.
Online pets का दिखाता हूँ ना.
Okay, guys, broad poll, right? Anybody who would like to invest in an online pet services marketplace?
I think I will invite Kushal to talk about the pets market. He was the guy who invested very recently in a pet company.
Is Kushal around?
Yeah, I think Kushal is there.
Kushal, want to take the stage?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a free case. I mean, when we invested.
But how did you look at the market and how you? There will be some learning for other people.
Yeah, so this company was growing quite fast. We met them, and when we invested in just those 3 to 4 months, they had already 4x their numbers monthly. Of course, later on, we found out there were other issues in that company. The numbers were not true. But when we invested, the idea was that we made a wrong assumption on number of people who can afford to pay for these kind of services. So it was a pet walking, pet grooming, pets, all kinds of pet services rolled into one platform. And the idea was that we will use pet walking as a very big pain point because drivers and maids are refusing to do that, and guards. So basically, it was a pitch that, you know, as of now, the labor is not available to do these kind of services, and the labor that is available is going to do jobs like Swiggy, Zomato, and so on, and even much more. So we can basically set up a marketplace for people who can come and walk your dog or take care of your cat, and then we can do added higher value services like giving your pet a haircut, you know, doing vet consultations, and also selling you pet food and so on. Learning there, to be honest, was more on recognizing reality from you know, fiction. But as a market also, the total number of people in Gurgaon, for example, where they were operating, was not more than 5,000 people who will be able to afford to pay something for a service like this.
Kushal, if I play the devil's advocate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think people are marrying late, people are retiring early.
Yeah,
There are a lot of single nests, a lot of people don't have kids. There are single child. All of these profiles are very ideal for pet adoption, right?
correct. So that was our thesis that
So if that
in
is
fact,
the case, even if the market is small today, in like your Gurgaon numbers show you,
yeah.
why wouldn't the market open up in the next decade?
Difficult to say, but I think the why wouldn't open it? So it could still open up. I mean, that company, as I said, right, the reason why it didn't work was something else. I
No, I
still
have a
feel
theory around why it will not open up that much. There is a constraint, right? I mean, so why will it not open up? I have a feeling it will not open up. But just want to ask the group, you know, if anybody has anything to say about why will the market not open up? Hello? Okay,
someone's mic is on, I think.
that's a fair.
I, I think there is one more learning which we had in that whole thing is that if you are doing a market sizing of a company, right, and of an industry, then always try to go and look at some of the public numbers which are there in the
Correct.
market, right, and try to do a first level triangulation, right, because like Anand gave a very interesting example in the morning that if you are basically looking at a pet industry, you should go and look at the pet medicines, right? How many dogs are getting vaccinated, right? And what is the market size of that market, right? And that will give a rough idea to you that what will be the overall pet services market, because it can't be that none of the pets are getting vaccinated, but all of the pet owners will pay for the
Other way around.
In fact, I remember, Madhukar, you had mentioned that entire pet food sales of pedigree, for example, in India was something like 600, 800 crores, something in that range,
Yeah.
For whole of India. So
Like
you had a strong
the
point that how
market
will
share.
they be bigger than
Yeah,
that?
yeah. This is like a 50% market share brand.
Yeah.
But the sales are only this much, and so I think the market is small. I also feel that the small apartments and increasingly small apartments are a big challenge. For by and large, pets are kept by people who own the apartment, people who keep shifting in rentals, because in many buildings in Bombay, dogs are not allowed, particularly if you're on rent. So ownership is a problem, size of apartment is a problem, ability to walk the dog around in large cities is a problem. And most of these companies seek to service starting from top tier cities, right? So maybe in smaller towns like, let's say, Chandigarh, etc., where people have bungalows and villas, maybe it'll work. But in Bombay, Delhi, particularly in the real dense urban places, it's a little difficult thing to keep a dog. I mean, people do keep, but very few.
Yeah. So the pro point for this, Anand, when we did it, one of the things we felt that could change in the market is that more people will be able to keep dogs if a service like this existed. So if you tap a button and your problem gets solved,
I think you're right, Kushal. But the ability to get the dog walked by a company is not good enough for me to adopt a dog. I mean, it's a useful convenience, but this will not expand the dog market. That's the point. It probably might to some extent, but some people who are on the borderline might convert.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's by the way, it is reasonably expensive to keep a dog, right?
Correct.
So I think in terms of purchasing power, also the country doesn't really have an average dog. Like, you know, I spoke to some people. We also have a pet company. It was called DogSpot. So people say that between 5 to 10,000 rupees per month per dog is what they spend by and large in cities, right? Unless you want to feed rotis to the dog, right? Unless you want to feed some chicken cooked in pressure cooker, the cost is reasonably high. So by being able to afford a well-groomed, properly fed, good diet and good grooming and all is pretty expensive. So okay, guys, I think Madhukar, are we done?
Yeah, we are done.
Okay.